Cal Mercer believed in two things above all else: immutable data and immovable deadlines. On the first Thursday of April, both taunted him from opposite sides of the same glass wall. Inside the executive conference room of Helix Biodynamics, the Denver skyline headquarters he'd built molecule by molecule, 12 board members sat beneath a chandelier of interlocking double helices, each strand fabricated from recycled lab pipettes as a not-so-subtle reminder that science funded their stock options. A Wall Street reporter live-streamed from the corner. Everyone waited for the quarterly Q&A to begin, eyes flicking toward Cal's empty chair at the head of the table. Outside the room, Cal stood in a narrow corridor, knuckles white around a printout that should not, by any statistical model, have existed. Patient ID, C. Mercer. Assay, quantitative sperm analysis. Result, 2.8 million/ml, motility 41%. Not record-setting, but definitively, undeniably, fertile. For 5 years those numbers had been zeros. After the skiing accident, 3 separate urologists had declared the damage clinically irreversible. He'd made peace with the verdict by burying himself in gene therapy acquisitions, until the tabloids crowned him the sterile silicon king. He pretended the nickname amused him, inside it carved caverns. Now, 23 months into a hush-hush experimental protocol designed by one audacious embryologist on his payroll, a single night, one improvised tweak to a CRISPR-guided microfluidic extraction, had rewritten every prognosis. Statistical outlier. Biological coup. He should have felt triumphant, but adrenaline tasted like rust on his tongue. The experiment's success threatened to upend more than shareholder gossip. It forced him to confront a possibility he'd sealed off like a quarantined lab. You going to frame that or share it? Junie Quinn's voice drifted from behind, low and half out of breath. She must have sprinted the stairwell. Lab goggles perched in her midnight black curls, mismatched socks peeking above hazard orange clogs. She looked nothing like the white coat poster children helming most biotech teams, and maybe that's why her theories raced miles ahead of theirs. Cal turned. Their eyes locked, and in that brief silence raw voltage pulsed between them, discovery, disbelief, and something less academic. She nodded toward the printout. Validation run confirms it. Triple-checked. How? Cal managed, his baritone fracturing. We patched gene damage, sure, she said. But motility? That's pure epigenetic magic. Your germ cells wanted a second chance. Wanted. The word caught him off guard. Biological processes didn't want things. Yet he couldn't deny the ferocious surge of hope flooding him. Hope, the emotion he trusted least because it skewed calculations. A chime echoed, conference room door about to unlock on its automated schedule. Through the glass wall, board members leaned forward. A director tapped her watch. The reporter's lens swung to frame the imminent entrance of the CEO. Cal exhaled, folding the printout once, twice, sliding it into the inner pocket of his charcoal suit. This stays between us until I can model the fallout. Fallout? Junie arched a brow. Cal, this isn't a hostile leak. It's life. Life complicates projections, he said, then regretted the flatness of his tone. Softer he added, I'll brief you tonight. 2,100 hours, data wing. She stepped closer, lowering her goggles until the green-tinted lenses mirrored his own uncertainty. Tonight, Mercer. No delays. We've birthed a statistical impossibility, the least we can do is talk about it. With that she pivoted, lab coat flaring like a banner, and disappeared down the stairwell. Cal inhaled the ozone she always carried, acetone and peppermint gum, then squared his shoulders and pushed into the conference room. Lights blazed, cameras rolled. He greeted the board with a tight smile, a gladiator entering the arena. As he began reciting revenue growth and pipeline timelines, a private mantra thudded beneath each syllable, 2.8 million per milliliter. Data that appended destiny. Deadline, tonight, when one night, and one woman, would force him to decide whether statistical miracles belonged in quarterly reports or in the deeper, riskier ledger of the human heart. Cal's closing slide, projected CAGR lines arcing like well-behaved constellations, faded to black, and polite applause fluttered around the table. Shareholders loved predictability. Cal offered it in year-stacked columns, risk-adjusted to the 100th decimal. Yet beneath his measured cadence the printout in his breast pocket burned like a matchstick. "Questions?" he asked. Martin Leroux, venture partner and habitual contrarian, adjusted silver glasses. "Bloomberg reports you've poured 9 figures into an internal fertility program that's yielded nothing for pipeline monetization. When do we sunset that vanity spend?" Cal's pulse spiked, but his face remained in neutral gear. "Helix invests in frontier biology. Even negative data refines our algorithmic drug discovery models." Leroux smirked. "Shareholders prefer positive data." Cal allowed the faintest hint of a smile. "So do I, Martin. Good news takes time." He switched off the projector before anyone could spot the micro-tremor in his hand. Meeting adjourned, he strode to the private elevator. The Wall Street reporter tried for a hallway soundbite. Cal waved him off with a tight-lipped, "No comment until FDA submission." In the hush of the elevator car, mirrored walls reflected a man who appeared impeccably poised, charcoal suit uncreased, tie the color of surgical steel, yet his eyes, usually glacier calm, flickered with storm readouts. At the 42nd floor he exited straight into the CEO lab suite, bypassing assistants' questions with a raised palm. The suite resembled a minimalist chapel to molecular hope, cryo-freezers lining one wall, glass workstations glowing with holographic plasmid maps. He unlocked the climate-controlled vault and removed a slim cryovio labeled CM CRISPR beta 9. The edited germ cell sample that had, against every actuarial forecast, produced motile sperm. He held it up to the ceiling LEDs. Each faint cell within carried a blueprint for dismantling the narrative that had trailed him for half a decade. His watch pinged, 1900 hours, dinner with Baidu delegation. He silenced it, stuffed the flask into a portable nitrogen sleeve, and left by the fire stairs to avoid staff. For the next 2 hours he sat in a corporate steakhouse tolerating small talk about Chinese venture co-ops while the vial chilled his inner jacket pocket like a clandestine heartbeat. 2102, Lab Sub-Basement, Data Wing. Junie Quinn was already there, perched lotus-style on a swivel chair, tapping figures into a neural net model projected onto the wall. Her goggles formed a green halo of code on the lenses, making her look like some mythic oracle of wetware. "You're late," she said without looking up. "Board obligations," he replied, sealing the door. Only after he placed the cryo sleeve on the bench did she swivel to face him. Her gaze darted to the sleeve, back to his eyes. "Viability?" she asked. "Confirmed." He exhaled. It wasn't a fluke. She punched the air, a small scientist's victory gesture, then sobered. "We need a replication cohort, another extraction in 72 hours. Cal loosened his tie. "We also need containment. If Leroux's faction smells success, they'll patent the protocol before peer review, claim my personal case as proprietary data." She stood, planting her boots apart in that defiant stance he'd come to recognize. "Containment kills science, Cal. These edits repair vasal obstructions directly at the germ line. It's bigger than either of our reputations. You think I don't know that?" His voice bounced off stainless steel, sharper than intended. He checked it. But a premature leak could cripple FDA pathways. "Remember Jessie Gelsinger?" Her shoulders softened, the name, poster child for gene therapy cautionary tales, always cooled bravado. "Fine. We anonymize the replication. Use donor initials only." Cal nodded, tension bleeding. He tapped a console, biometric scanners unlocked the biobank hatch. Liquid nitrogen vapor curled as he retrieved blank cryo vials. "We'll schedule the second extraction Saturday at 0600. No differential hormones, same nanotube payload." She handed him a sterile labeling strip. Their fingers brushed, static crackled. He cleared his throat. After the procedure, we debrief the full team. Only then do we approach the ethics board. Junie chewed her lip, then murmured, "You're deflecting from the personal fallout." She pointed at his pocket. "Those numbers mean you can father children, Cal. Have you processed that?" His jaw tightened. Images flashed unbidden, nursery stills from advertisements he'd skipped, the empty guest room in his penthouse he told himself would be a VR studio. "Data first," he said. "Feelings after validation." She stepped closer, peppermint scent cut through the antiseptic air. "Since when does a data set kick at 4 a.m. and keep you awake? Biology is messy. You can't peer review the part of you that's terrified." He wanted to argue, but the truth slammed him. Terror did sing under the triumph, because fatherhood wasn't a market he could hedge. He broke her gaze, focusing on the glowing cell counts. "Help me replicate, Junie," he said quietly. "Then maybe I can believe the story changes." She rested a hand on his forearm, warm through his rolled-up sleeve. "We'll replicate. We'll audit. And then we'll decide what story to publish, together." Minutes later the security camera recorded them exiting separately. Protocol demanded no hint of fraternization. Yet down the corridor, their shadows overlapped for a heartbeat, indistinguishable. 23:45, Cal returned to his penthouse, removed the rolled blueprint from behind a liquor shelf, a conceptual nursery he'd once sketched as therapy. He unrolled it on the kitchen island. Crayon lines looked unbearably fragile against granite. He reached for the phone, thumb hovering over contacts at the letter S, his sister, Celine, the only family who knew how deeply the infertility scarred him. He didn't dial. Instead he opened a secure biotech channel and typed. Subject, Mercer Fertility Protocol, Replication Task Order Initiate Saturday 6 o'clock. Restrict access to Quinn, Mercer, Reinhardt. Data code, triple blind. He hit send, feeling the gravity of each keystroke. Somewhere in the city lights below, cab headlights traced capillaries of possibility. For the first time in years, tomorrow no longer felt like a controlled variable, it felt like quantum superposition, both nightmare and miracle, waiting for observation. Cal set his alarm for 4:30. As he lay in darkness, the printout rested on his nightstand, numbers glowing faint under the city's sodium haze. 2.8 million units of shattered certainty, and the hint of 3 heartbeats he could not yet hear, but whose statistical probability had leapt from near zero to breathtakingly non-null. He closed his eyes, and in the liminal hush before sleep found him, he whispered the hypothesis that frightened him more than any board rebellion: I might become a father. The lab never truly slept, but in the gentle blue hour before sunrise it felt as close to dreaming as steel and circuitry could manage. Refrigerant pumps murmured like distant tide, and the safety lights along the hallway pulsed a faint lavender that made the white tiles look almost soft. Junie arrived first, sliding her key card through the security pad, breath fogging in the crisp spring air she trapped inside her hoodie. She carried 2 coffees and a brown paper bag that released the scent of butter and cinnamon. No rule in molecular biology said hope had to taste bland. Cal materialized from the service elevator exactly on time, hair damp from a shower taken in the penthouse gym, charcoal t-shirt tucked into lab-approved trousers. He offered a terse nod that tried, and failed, to hide the nervous seam puckering his brow. When Junie handed him the larger coffee cup, their fingers met, fused for a half-second by static, then withdrew as though the touch itself was contraband. They scrubbed in without speaking. Gloves snapped, masks unfurled, and suddenly they were 2 professionals locked inside the ritual they trusted more than words. In the procedure suite, stainless counters were already prepped, microfluidic chip arrays glinting beneath task lights, nitrogen-cooled storage pods hissing miniature clouds. At the center sat the new nanotube delivery cartridge, core temperature steady, a lullaby of readiness. Junie broke the silence first. No board auditors, no LaRue, no spectators. Just you, me, and the stubbornness of biology. Cal's reply was so quiet she almost missed it through the ventilation. Stubbornness and one miraculous anomaly. They reviewed the checklist twice, although they both knew it by muscle memory: calibration of the extraction catheter, alignment of laser guidance, verification of CRISPR payload integrity. The air seemed to thicken with each ticked box until Junie felt she could slice it with a pipette tip. At last there were no more lines to read. Cal removed his suit jacket, draped it over the back of a chair, and lay on the treatment table. The room lights dimmed to surgical amber. Junie positioned the shield and adjusted the microscopes until Cal's abdomen and lower torso became a landscape of magnified capillaries glowing on the overhead monitor. He kept his gaze fixed on a single duct-taped square on the ceiling, left over from maintenance, using it as a point of infinite distance. The procedure was delicate but brief. Junie's hands moved with the steadiness of a watchmaker, coaxing the catheter through tissue that had been scarred and re-stitched too many times. The screen lit with cascading data as retrieved germ cells flowed into the chip, each tiny figure painting a brighter shade of possibility. When it was done, she sealed the incision with surgical glue and stepped back, chest tight with a cocktail of relief and disbelief. Cal eased upright, pale but composed. "How does it look?" he asked, voice sandpapered. "Better than last time," she said, throat suddenly thick. "Much better." She transferred the chip to the analysis dock. A waterfall of numbers scrolled, but she ignored them for a moment, studying the pixels of modal life darting across the microscope field. Against odds that once felt cosmic, a dense constellation of possibilities flickered alive. Cal rose and came to stand beside her. Their shoulders brushed, neither moved away. They watched the screen cycle through motility graphs until Cal spoke, softer than fluorescence. "If this works, if children become more than a theoretical, what then, Junie?" It was the first time he'd pushed conversation into that hinterland where data blurred into desire. Junie felt her lungs snag. She toggled off the monitor, plunging them into half-lit silence broken only by the breathy swirl of the HEPA filters. "Then," she answered, "we start the next protocol, learning how to live with the miracle we've engineered." He turned toward her. In the amber gloom the hard edges of his face softened, and for a heartbeat the guarded CEO looked like any man who'd just been handed a fragile piece of the future. She reached up, resting gloved fingertips against his temple, an intimate gesture sanitized by nitrile. His phone buzzed in his discarded jacket, a shrill reminder of the outer world. Neither moved for it. Instead, Cal stripped off his gloves, tossed them into the biohazard bin, and captured her hand, skin now against skin, warm and grounding. "I don't know how to draft that protocol," he whispered. "Good," she said, a smile tugging despite the lump in her throat. "Because it won't need sterile technique. Just iteration." She expected him to retreat into caution, but he surprised her by leaning in, pressing his forehead to hers. Their breaths mingled, coffee-scented and shaky. In that quiet a truth nested itself between them. Even the most controlled experiment sometimes demanded faith. The spell broke when a soft chime announced assay completion. They parted, restoring professional distance, though the air still trembled with what had almost happened. Junie keyed the results to the wall display. The motility graph spiked higher than the initial miracle, a clean upward slope that left no room for denial. Cal exhaled, half laugh, half sigh. Second confirmation. "Replication verified," she said, cheeks aching because she couldn't stop smiling. "You're officially off the statistical blacklist." He nodded once, then stepped away, retrieving his jacket. By the time he shrugged it on, the CEO mask had returned, but there was a fissure through which light streamed. They transferred the sample to cryo storage, encrypted the data, and wrote a joint entry in the tamper-proof ledger. Junie signed her name, Cal signed beneath, then added a single line only she could see from her angle: "Hope not yet quantified." Outside, dawn had fully unfurled, spilling gold over the Rockies. Cal opened the door for her, an old-world courtesy at odds with sliding security panels. As they walked the corridor, Junie asked, teasing, "Will you still make the 8 o'clock acquisition call?" "Only to delay it," he said. I have a nursery blueprint gathering dust. She laughed, not at the blueprint but at the shy, earnest way he said it, like a man learning the shape of an impossible word. At the junction where their paths split, her to the embryology wing, him to the executive elevators, they paused. No cameras here, no live feeds. Cal brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, fingertips lingering a millisecond too long. Lunch? He asked. Lunch, she agreed. And maybe after that we'll write the feelings section of the paper you keep postponing. He walked backward a few steps, a rare boyish gesture. You'll have to co-author. My feelings grammar is rusty. I'm fluent, she said, waving the lab goggles like a flag of truce. We'll edit in real time. He turned and strode away, and Junie watched until the elevator swallowed him. Only then did she let out the laugh rising in her chest, giddy, disbelieving, exhilarated. In her pocket, a drive held the raw numbers that would shatter medical doctrine. In her ribs, something fluttered even wilder. Back in the lab, she pinned a sticky note to the culture incubator, Day 0. Triplicate miracles pending incubation. Handle with reckless optimism. Then she got to work, calibrating instruments with steadier hands than she'd ever known, because the future had ceased to be an asymptote. It was now a point on the graph, bright and undeniable, accelerating toward them both. Sunlight poured into Cal's corner office like molten copper, setting every brushed steel edge aglow and turning the panoramic window into a high-definition mural of the Rockies. He should have been reviewing the acquisition term sheet spread across his desk, 50 pages of clauses and contingencies, but the document blurred each time his mind drifted to the cryogenic vault 3 floors below, where thousands of living cells with his genome now slumbered in liquid nitrogen. A gentle knock broke the reverie. Celine Mercer, his younger sister and Helix's general counsel, slipped in holding 2 takeaway smoothies the color of wet cement. Your EA said coffee's a no-go after the adrenal crash, she said, setting one on the desk. Cal raised a brow. And gray sludge is better. Packed with adaptogens. She paused, studying him as only a sibling could. You look different. Lighter, almost. He felt it too, as if the steel rods of self-control that usually braced his spine had been replaced by something springier, less punitive. He deflected. Junie's protocol produced viable motility. Replication confirmed. Celine's eyes widened, her professional mask wavered. Cal, are you sure? Triple-checked. He pulled the folded essay from his breast pocket, smoothing it like an offering. Her hand flew to her mouth. Then, lawyer instincts kicking in, she scanned the hallway and shut the door. Does the board know? Not yet. Junie and I agreed on a controlled disclosure sequence, ethics board first, then FDA. She perched on his desk corner, sneakers swinging. And personally? What do you want? The question cracked open an interior room he'd kept barred. Images crowded in, Junie's fingers brushing his, the ultrasound suites he'd only visited for other people's children, a future where the nursery blueprint upstairs was more than architectural therapy. Wanting gave leverage to fear, but for the first time, the leverage felt worth risking. Before he could answer, his phone pinged. A push alert, breaking, Helix Insider hints at fertility breakthrough. The article was scant on detail, padded with recycled tabloid jabs, but the timing sent ice down Cal's spine. Only 2 people outside the closed protocol could have leaked, a low-level lab tech on night shift or Martin LaRue's mole in compliance. Damage needed immediate containment. He tapped the intercom. Cancel my calls. Secure conference room C in 30 minutes. Junie, Reinhardt, Celine only. Downstairs, Junie stood outside the conference glass wall, goggles shoved to her forehead, hair frizzed by static. Dr. Salas Reinhardt, Helix's ethically feared but medically revered chief of clinical trials, loomed beside her, silver braid coiled like a rope. Cal ushered them in, activated a white noise jammer, and slid the tablet across the table. Junie skimmed the article. The leak misquotes our motility figures but knows we're working on post-vasal gene edits. Could be guesswork. Guesswork with suspicious accuracy, Reinhardt growled. Her desert-tanned face rarely showed emotion, but just now the set of her jaw suggested volcanic potential. I've tight-lined every staff comms channel. Someone's whispering. Celine paced. If Leroux weaponizes rumor, the SEC will sniff insider trading. We must document that Cal's data stayed firewalled. Cal pressed palms to the glossy surface, feeling its chill. We accelerate. Ethics Board submission tonight, FDA pre-ND memo tomorrow morning. Beat Leroux's narrative with verifiable trail. Reinhardt nodded once. I'll prep immunogenicity disclaimers. The plan hammered out in terse, overlapping dialogue, anonymize Cal's sample as Case X01, bundle replication assays, draft adverse event contingency. Celine would craft a cease and desist for any outlet repeating sterile CEO defamation. Junie's job, run one more quality test, comet assay for DNA fragmentation, before midnight. Meeting adjourned, but Junie lingered. The others exited, door whooshing shut. Alone with Cal, she exhaled shakily. First miracle and already under siege. He touched her elbow, gentle thumb arcs through the cotton sleeve. Sieges end. Data remains. Their closeness vibrated, the glass wall felt suddenly too transparent. She stepped back, professional surface sliding over emotion. Comet assay calls, she said, heading for the door. She hesitated, turned. Hope still isn't science, but it's a pretty good catalyst. She was gone. Late evening settled like velvet over the city. Junie hunched in the genomics bay, watching electrophoresis bands crawl, no fragmentation, genome pristine. Relief made her knees buckle, she sagged onto a stool. Cal arrived moments later, pizza box in one hand, tie long gone. They ate slices over the humming incubators, sharing quiet triumph. He told her about the nursery blueprint. She teased him, cribs already color-coded to your share classes. He rolled his eyes, admitting he knew nothing about paint palettes. She confessed she once repurposed an incubator into a terrarium for orphan sugar gliders during grad school. Laughter loosened them both, carving new space. At 1:12 the ethics board queue pinged green, submission accepted for expedited review. Cal closed his laptop. The lab's low lights haloed Junie's face, exhaustion smudging but not dimming her eyes. Without thinking too hard, he reached out, brushing a smear of gel stain from her cheek. She caught his wrist, held it. Silence expanded, steady, expectant. I'm terrified, he admitted, a raw whisper no boardroom had ever heard. So am I, she murmured. But terror and wonder share the same neurochemical zip code. His laugh cracked, half sob, half release. He drew her into an embrace, awkward at first, then anchoring. Her head fit beneath his chin, his heartbeat thundered into her ear. Around them, freezers exhaled nitrogen fog like blessing smoke. They didn't kiss, the moment asked only for breathing together inside the new perimeter of trust. When they finally parted, the world felt rearranged, coordinates redrawn. Cal tucked a stray curl behind her ear. Rest. Tomorrow we face Leroux. She nodded, stepping back, but kept his gaze. And eventually we face something bigger. Eventually, he agreed. He watched her walk down the corridor, every footfall lighting a floor panel that dimmed after she passed, like constellations winking out behind her. Alone, he stood amid centrifuges and silent sequencers, senses tuned to the hum of machines and a quieter, deeper pulse, the realization that for the first time in years his future, and theirs, couldn't be rendered in a spreadsheet. Some variables were meant to live off-grid, beating beyond algorithms, daring him to follow. Cal left the lab with the submission receipt tucked into his wallet, right beside the miracle assay. Outside, Denver's skyline blinked in patient Morse. Above it, unseen but true, 3 potential heartbeats waited for permission to enter the narrative, their odds improving every hour he and Junie refused to surrender the data, or their hope, to doubt. Midsummer storms drummed against the glass facade of Helix Biodynamics, turning the 43rd floor executive lounge into an aquarium of gray light and restless water. Cal stood at the window with a mug that had gone lukewarm, reviewing an email that should have felt like victory. Helix Independent Ethics Board, unanimous approval, Phase I Clinical Fertility Protocol. The subject line blazed triumph, yet triumph tasted muted, muffled by the thunder still gathering behind it. He forwarded the notice to Junie and Dr. Reinhardt, then copied Celine with a single instruction, file with FDA today. Seconds later Celine's reply popped up, already formatting ECTD modules, brace for Leroux. She needed not add more. Rumor had reached Leroux's hedge fund allies overnight, and pre-market trading showed heavy short positions against Helix. The classic gamblers bet that scandal would outpace science. Cal turned from the window just as Martin Leroux himself strode into the lounge, no appointment, no knock, carrying the latest tabloid with a headline large enough to read from 10 steps away, Sterile CEO Miracle. Or CRISPR cover-up. Leroux dropped the paper onto the table between them, pages splashing like cards in a rigged poker game. Explain before CNBC does, Leroux said, voice all silk-wrapped steel. Cal set his mug aside. You staged this ambush to ask questions you already think you know the answers to. I know rumors, Leroux corrected. Rumors that overnight you reversed a physiologically permanent injury. Rumors you're hiding safety data. Cal inhaled. Storm or no storm, confrontation required clear oxygen. Safety data is filed. Independent ethics approval arrived at dawn. FDA pre-submission launches in an hour. Leroux's eyes narrowed. Then disclose it to shareholders. We deserve material information. When the IND is accepted, you will receive the briefing deck. Cal kept tone neutral but unyielding. Your leak jeopardized embargoed findings, expect General Counsel's letter. A flash of lightning silhouetted Leroux, behind him the clouds looked almost funnel-shaped. If this is real, Mercer, you've changed germline therapy forever. But you've also tied the company's fate to your personal biology. Hope you understand what happens if the next assay drops back to 0. Cal felt the printout in his breast pocket, last night's Comet assay perfection, like a shield. Replication numbers are climbing, Martin. Bet accordingly. Leroux studied him, perhaps seeking a microtremor. Finding none, he left with a shrug that looked heavier than any gesture Cal had seen the man make. Alone again, Cal allowed himself one heartbeat of vulnerability, leaning a knuckle against the window. The storm outside shifted, wind gusts twisting sheets of rain in chaotic vectors. Somewhere below, in a level 4 core lab, Junie prepared the next phase, fertilized blastocyst development in triplicate bioreactors. Each embryo represented a 1 in 10 million statistical resurrection. Each embryo, if viable, might someday call him father. The elevator chimed. Junie emerged in scrubs, goggles perched like always, tablet tucked under her arm. She looked windblown despite never stepping outdoors, a consequence of sprinting through air-pressured corridors. I saw Leroux exit. Survived the hurricane. Eye of the storm, Cal said. Ethics approval is in. FDA pre-file will dampen him. She nodded, then waved her tablet. More dampening, early trifectator markers from embryo group alpha. Her thumb expanded the heat map to full screen. 3 columns glowed healthy greens and steady yellows. No aneuploidy flags. Their textbook. For a moment words failed him. He reached out, tracing the color bars as if they were fragile glass. Junie's voice softened. One step at a time, but it's the step we prayed for. Prayed. The word vibrated oddly pleasant in his rationalist brain. They moved to his office where storm-dimmed light pooled like pewter. Junie balanced the tablet against a stack of acquisition binders and perched on the edge of the massive desk. Next milestone is implantation, she said. If we proceed. The air thickened. Implantation meant choosing a surrogate, or Junie herself, though medical protocol would scream bias. He took the leather chair opposite her. Risks escalate. You could step back. I can hire external surrogates under blind control. Could, she agreed. Won't. A slender smile. Told you, scientists' reckless optimism. He realized his hand had lifted, fingers brushing a stray curl above her ear. Reckless is relative. We stood up to Leroux, a womb should be trivial. She laughed, nervous and delighted. First time anyone called my uterus trivial. Lightning cracked again, lights flickered, UPS units beeped. An alarm panel flashed grid instability, back feed engaged. Cal thumbed the intercom. Activate building microgrid. Route to battery banks. A junior engineer's voice answered, wide-eyed. Already switched, sir. Fertility wing on independent power. Junie glanced at the window. Denver monsoon season making a case study for micro-resilience. He allowed a brief grin. Every crisis, a proof of concept. Her gaze held his. Including us? The question etched itself into the charged silence. Beyond the glass, rain blurred the horizon until city and mountain merged. His internal risk matrix flared, board outrage, media intrusion, the terror Celine had named, but the alternative, a life measured only in NASDAQ ticks, looked suddenly desolate. He stepped closer, traced the line of her jaw with a thumb. Especially us. This time when they kissed it wasn't a stolen spark in lab fluorescence, it was deliberate, stormlit, anchored by a century-old city skyline rattling under thunderclaps. It was messy and utterly unscientific. And it felt inevitable, two data points colliding after running parallel too long. They parted, breathing synchronous. Sirens wailed faintly, just weather alerts, but neither flinched. Implantation consult at 1400, she whispered, cheeks flushed. We'll need legal consents, gene editing paper trails, insurance riders. I'll handle lawyers, he said. You handle miracles. She slipped out, leaving the scent of peppermint and ozone. Cal turned to the window once more. The storm cell began to drift east, jagged clouds peeled away to reveal sun-silver edges, light spilling like revelation onto wet streets. He watched until a quiet certainty settled beneath his ribs. Some storms arrived not to ravage but to irrigate parched ground, leaving behind something that could root, grow, and, if nurtured, transform skylines into forests. He pivoted toward his desk, opened a new task in his project manager, and titled it in plain language that no memo could misread. Prepare for triplets. The implantation suite had the serenity of a library and the hum of a starship. Low amber panels traced the floor, guiding Junie to the padded recliner that tilted almost, not quite, flat. Its synthetic leather smelled faintly of citrus disinfectant. Above her, instead of ceiling tiles, stretched a curved OLED dome that projected a slow-moving aurora meant to steady patient heart rates. Junie knew because she had coded the color algorithm herself, 3 gradients keyed to real-time cortisol. Dr. Salas Reinhardt checked the bioreactor once more, ritual, not need, then slid the first embryo straw into the portable nitrogen cradle. Even through layers of gloves Reinhardt cradled the ampoule as though it were spun sugar. Alpha 3 first, she murmured, voice pitched for cathedrals, not clinics. Best morphology, 36 cells, 0 fragmentation. Cal stood at the glass partition beyond the sterile zone, arms folded so tightly his watch left a half-moon mark in his forearm. He wore scrub green instead of his usual charcoal armor. Someone had offered a surgical cap, but the cap lay forgotten in his fist. When Junie caught his gaze, she read both terror and wonder and sent back what she hoped was calm. He pressed a palm to the glass. She lifted hers until only 6 millimeters and a universe separated them. They had argued until 3 a.m. about using Junie's body instead of an anonymous surrogate. Cal's risk chart screamed malpractice, Junie's gut said authenticity mattered. Reinhardt had listened, taken blood work, cross-matched HLA markers, then issued the verdict with her trademark dryness: CEO's sperm, lead scientist's womb, peer-reviewed oversight. The optics stink, but the data will sing. And so the ethics addendum had been filed, notarized by Celine, approved by a bleary committee still in last night's clothes. Now Reinhardt loaded the embryo into the microcatheter. The OLED aurora shifted from violet to dawn rose. Junie felt the table warm at her lower back and forced herself to breathe in measured fours. The speculum bite was a dull pinch, the catheter's progress barely a tickle. Reinhardt watched an ultrasound monitor, steering the flicker of white through uterine labyrinth. 1, the physician said softly. A bead of light pulsed on the screen where embryo Alpha 3 settled. 2. Alpha 2 arrived, nested a centimeter away. Junie's heartbeat inched into the 60s. And 3. Alpha 1 slipped into place like the final coordinate of a secret constellation. Catheter out. Speculum gone. Reinhardt pressed a gloved hand on Junie's abdomen as if blessing new territory. Remain tilted for 15. No coughing marathons. Junie nodded, her throat felt stuffed with damp cotton. Reinhardt sealed the isolation lock and glided out, leaving Cal and Junie alone but for glass and quiet machines. The intercom squawked. Cal's voice, lower than usual. Pain. She shook her head. Just gravity shifting. He studied her, chest rising in measured metronome. Tell me what happens next, pretend I'm not the CEO who pretends to know everything. Next, she said, breath evening, the blastocysts hatch, burrow into the endometrium. Implantation bleeds maybe. Then beta-HCG in 10 days. And odds of triplets? He tried for wry humor, it landed crooked. Statistically slim. She smiled, half sleepy, half defiant. But statistics and we aren't on speaking terms. 14 minutes later Reinhardt returned, swung the recliner upright. Junie shuffled to a wheelchair, hospital protocol. Cal met them at the airlock. He clasped her hand, no gloves now, only skin, warm and trembling, and pushed her down corridors that smelled of polished copper and ozone. He ignored his phone vibrating non-stop, SEC counsel, PR crisis team, Leroux's pet journalist. Ahead lay a private recovery suite, walls paneled in reclaimed redwood, windows framing a sunset she would mostly sleep through. Inside, nurses fussed with vitals. Cal settled in a chair, refusing to leave. When shift change night nurse hinted he should rest elsewhere, he signed a waiver and stretched on the convertible sofa, jacket as blanket. Junie drifted between morphine-soft dozes, waking at dusk to see him typing on a tablet, drafting a shareholder letter titled On Scientific Uncertainty and Corporate Responsibility. She dozed again. When she woke near midnight he sat beside her bed, head bowed, thumb tracing patterns on her pulse point. She murmured his name. His eyes lifted, stormy but steady. I didn't know how lonely certainty made me, he said. She squeezed his fingers, answering with a silence that said same. Morning brought news bombs. Celine called first. Leroux had filed a motion with the board demanding immediate audit of unauthorized reproductive trials, leveraging the tabloid leak. 30% of Helix shares roiled. Cal's legal team drafted counters, but AGM was in 6 weeks. Investors wanted transparent proof, safety data, FDA correspondence, maybe even footage of today's transfer. Celine hinted that revealing Junie as patient would amplify both sympathy and scandal. Cal asked for an hour to decide. Celine gave him 40 minutes, tops. He ended the call, rubbing eyes gritty from zero sleep. Junie sat propped by pillows, hair a chaotic halo, for stand quietly dripping. We go public, she said before he spoke. That risks you. Also the embryos. She motioned to her abdomen. Embryos are already on the record passengers. And Leroux drags us to exposure anyway, better we hold the mic. Cal paced to the window. Rain had ceased, sunlight glittered on the distant Platte River. Shareholders perceive risk like sharks, blood equals frenzy. Then show them a bigger ocean, she countered. Triplets aren't your product, resilience is. You beat impossible odds twice. Let them invest in that. He turned, realization dawning. Her reckless optimism was not the antithesis of strategy, it was the missing variable. He exhaled. Press conference at noon. You co-lead. Reinhardt poked her head in, overheard. Fine, under condition we pre-announce the next trial cohort. Otherwise speculation eats us. Cal nodded, battle plan forming. Celine will vet talking points. Charts of motility, assay, ethics stamps. We withhold pregnancy until viability scan. Junie smirked. Since when do revolutionaries wait for viability scans? Since the revolution includes SEC filings. His smile answered hers. Noon saw Helix's auditorium packed, investors, scientists, reporters jostling under softbox lights. Cal took the podium in a navy suit that downplayed exhaustion. He spoke of legacy infertility, of investment in high-risk research, of the ethical duty to pursue hope when data opened a crack. He introduced Dr. Juniper Quinn as the architect of that hope. Junie stepped up, hair tamed into a knot, eyes bright. She explained CRISPR micro-repair in plain metaphor, resewing broken seams in the genome with invisible thread, and laid out safety protocols. She displayed anonymized assay graphs. She did not mention embryos, but she closed with a glide that hinted at more. Science isn't a miracle factory, it's a long road where occasionally the impossible hitches a ride. We're buckling up. Questions flew. Leroux's ally asked if personal involvement skewed oversight. Cal answered indomitable, transparency is our sedative against bias. Every data point is open to FDA and external review. Another asked if Cal himself remained infertile. He looked the reporter dead on. Numbers speak louder than rumors. You'll see the peer review. Applause erupted, ragged but real. Shares ticked upward on live feed. Backstage, Celine hugged them both, rare display. Reinhardt clapped Cal on the shoulder. Round one secured, she said. That evening, Junie was discharged under strict bed rest orders. Cal drove her to his penthouse, deemed more secure than her studio. The elevator opened into a space of slate, glass, and silence broken only by the hum of smart thermostats. He guided her to the guest room, fresh linens, blackout drapes, and hesitated. Stay here until beta HCG. I'll sleep down the hall. She reached for his hand, the gesture stopping him mid-turn. Stay tonight, she whispered, vulnerability stark in her eyes. Just sleep. He hesitated one breath, then nodded. In the quiet dark he lay atop the duvet, her hand tucked in his. City lights painted slow-moving constellations on the ceiling. He felt her breathing settle, his own heart sinking to hers. For the first time, the future's vast uncertainty thrilled rather than terrified him. Somewhere inside her 3 microscopic clusters nestled deeper, receiving nutrient whispers from blood. Outside, thunderheads dispersed, leaving the city rinsed and waiting. Cal closed his eyes and let the unknown roll toward him like a tide, trusting that together, with data, courage, and reckless optimism, they would learn to ride its rhythm. Sunlight leaked through the penthouse drapes as though reluctant to disturb the stillness. Cal woke first, not to an alarm but to the realization that Junie's fingers were woven through his. Sometime in the night she had drifted closer, seeking warmth or reassurance. Now she lay half-turned toward him, her breathing even but shallow, like a song only she could hear. He tried to memorize the moment, the way morning light feathered across her lashes, the subtle lift of her belly that held so much hope, as if committing it to memory might keep the coming hours from clawing it away. They had agreed to draw the first pregnancy blood work at sunrise, 66 hours post-transfer. The number would not confirm babies, only biochemical possibility, but possibilities had become their daily oxygen. Cal eased out of bed, traded the hush of the bedroom for the subdued hum of the kitchen, and began an espresso routine so methodical it felt ceremonial. By the time Junie appeared in the doorway, wrapped in one of his oversized sweatshirts, steam rose from 2 cups and the city beyond the glass had brightened from peach to a determined gold. She accepted the mug, cradling it against her chest. "Heartbeats ridiculous," she murmured, and he couldn't tell whether she meant hers or his. Neither needed caffeine, yet both sipped anyway, pretending the ritual could shore them up against whatever the lab analyzer would later pronounce. Celine arrived at 7 on the dot, medical kit in hand, blue nitrile gloves already snapped on. Corporate counsel, makeshift phlebotomist. Family had its privileges. She collected 2 vials from Junie's arm while the skyline reflected off the chrome syringe barrel. Cal labeled the tubes himself, anonymous barcodes despite the irony that half the building already knew whose blood pulsed inside. Reinhardt texted, "Lab primed. ETA 10 minutes." They rode the private elevator to the sub-basement, Celine guarding the samples like state secrets. The fertility wing felt different now, the air smelled faintly of new paint, the camera crew's scuffs had been repainted overnight, yet underneath lingered the sterile tang of formalin and possibility. Technicians straightened when the trio entered. Junie offered a tight smile but headed straight for the centrifuge bay. Cal waited with Celine behind a frosted window where the world shrank to the spin of a rotor and the countdown LED, 11:59. 11:58. He tried to distract himself with talk of shareholders, but Celine waved it off. "Leroux's proxy fight is losing momentum," she said. "Investors love underdogs turned disruptors. Turns out you're both at once." Her smirk faded to tenderness. "Whatever the assay shows, we'll deal." The rotor clicked to a stop. A technician extracted plasma, loaded it into the chemiluminescent analyzer. Another countdown. Junie stood on the other side of the room, arms folded over the sweatshirt, eyes fixed on the status bar. When the machine beeped completion, she didn't move. Reinhardt approached first, peered at the result, and her legendary composure cracked into a grin. Positive. Not a mere faint elevation but a bold, unequivocal surge of beta-HCG, 312 μ/ml, still cautious territory, but high for early day 3, hinting at multiple implantations. Cal's exhale sounded like escape velocity. Junie pressed a fist to her mouth, as if holding back a sound that might shatter glass. Reinhardt printed the readout, handed it to her. "Congratulations, Dr. Quinn. Your reckless optimism just gained a biochemical ally." Tears slid down Junie's cheeks before she could nod. Cal crossed the room, enveloped her in an embrace that drew applause from the staff until Celine corralled them back to tasks with mock severity. Junie's tears tasted like salt and adrenaline when he kissed her temple. "Step 1 complete," she whispered against his neck. They moved to a consultation alcove where Reinhardt outlined the next 14 days, progesterone support, serial labs, the critical viability ultrasound at 6 weeks. Junie listened, absorbing every protocol, but Cal noticed how her hand stayed anchored to his thigh, a silent request not to drift too far from shore. Their joy had only minutes to breathe before corporate reality intruded. Celine's phone buzzed, an emergency board summons, Leroux again, demanding immediate audit of all research budgets, citing clear conflict of interest between CEO and principal investigator. Celine mouthed an expletive. Junie sighed. Cal felt the old CEO armor steel over the rawness that had just cracked open. "Go," Junie said, squeezing his hand. "I have blood work and progesterone injections to babysit." Her smile was tremulous but fierce. He hesitated, guilt gnawed that he was leaving her alone with fragile beginnings, but she pushed lightly at his shoulder. "Tell the board we're not a liability. We're the best return on investment they'll ever see." Celine accompanied him topside while Reinhardt escorted Junie to the monitoring suite. In the elevator mirror Cal caught his reflection, eyes brighter than vacuum steel, a half-smile fighting the crease between his brows. Fatherhood, not yet, not guaranteed, but suddenly plausible, looked back at him. The boardroom felt colder than usual, climate control cranked to appease a midsummer HVAC glitch. Leroux sat at the far end, sleeves rolled with deliberate casualness, tablet glowing. Cal opened the session by distributing sanitized assay data, no names, only codes. Then he spoke, voice measured but carrying the undertone of a man who had watched embryonic heartbeats flicker under a microscope. Our fertility program is no longer speculative, he said. Preclinical success has triggered FDA fast-track interest. Investor risk becomes first-mover advantage. Leroux scoffed. And the cozy relationship between CEO and lead scientist. Governance committees will smell impropriety. Cal met his gaze. Transparency forms filed last night. Ethics board aware, FDA briefed. Helix was built on audacious science. We don't muzzle breakthroughs because they begin at home. Whispers around the table, some directors nodded. Cal continued, unveiling a timeline, Phase 1 enrollment of 10 post-vasectomy candidates, projected cost versus global infertility treatment market. Numbers sang. Even Leroux's expression tightened, as if forced to respect the harmony. When the vote finally came, simple majority to continue funding, the motion passed 8-4. Leroux recorded a dissent but offered no further fight. Céline exhaled audible relief. Meeting adjourned, Cal sagged inwardly, adrenaline bleeding dry. Yet as he stepped into the corridor, his phone vibrated, Junie. He answered mid-stride. I'm okay, she said, voice sleepy from progesterone, but the triplets are already demanding snacks. Triplets, he repeated, letting the syllables settle like seed in fertile soil. Good. Tell them their paternal board just approved their R&D budget. Her laugh brightened the phone line. Then hurry back. I'm hungry too. He promised 30 minutes, then paused by a window overlooking the storm-scrubbed city. Clouds parted, revealing a peak dusted in summer snow, rare, fleeting, beautiful. He thought of improbable weather patterns, improbable pregnancies, improbable love, all converging within these glass walls. The data said fragile. The board said risky. Cal felt only momentum, the ferocious gravity of 3 nascent lives tugging every algorithm toward new coordinates. He pocketed the phone and headed for the elevator, pulse synced to a rhythm that was not yet audible but already real. 1, 2, 3. Triplicate threads braiding future to present, impossible to inevitable, uncertainty to joy. Thunder rolled over Denver like a giant's drum the afternoon Junie crossed the 26-week mark and the doctors wheeled her into the surgical theater. Preeclampsia had flared with little warning, blurred vision at breakfast, protein spike by lunch, an alarming dip in placental flow by early evening. There would be no bargaining with time, Reinhardt said, the triplets were coming tonight or not at all. Cal scrubbed in beside the neonatal team, mask hiding everything except the terror in his eyes. The board coup Leroux had orchestrated only days earlier suddenly seemed remote, irrelevant, numbers on a resolution instead of the wild, thready pulse beneath Cal's latex-gloved fingertips. Céline hovered outside the sterile line, live-streaming paperwork to NICU insurance reviewers while whispering prayers she'd never admit to believing. The operating lights rose, white as comet tails. Junie squeezed Cal's hand till his knuckles blanched. Remember, she whispered, voice thick with magnesium drip, hope is a catalyst. He might have answered, I love you, or we've got this, but the anesthesiologist's countdown swallowed his reply, and the blue drape went up like a curtain between past and future. The first baby emerged minutes later, a tiny girl slick with vernix, lungs blazing a valiant scream that made seasoned nurses grin behind their masks. Aisling Quinn Mercer, Reinhardt announced, weight barely 2 pounds but heart rate fierce. Second stretched to years before the second infant, Brannock, slipped free, silent for one ragged breath before answering his sister with a war cry. The third, Cressida, arrived feet first, the defiant one, squalling before she had cleared the incision. Each newborn was whisked to a separate encirclement of machines and mentors, where warming tables glowed amber like miniature suns. Cal remained at Junie's head, forehead pressed to hers, tears leaking unchecked while surgical chatter filled the room, Apgar scores, umbilical gases, metabolic panels. 3 for 3, Reinhardt said at last, voice steady but eyes shining. All ventilated, all stable. Only when Junie was in recovery did Cal allow himself to sag against the wall, scrubs damp with adrenaline. Celine found him there and slid a piece of paper into his palm, LaRue's formal resignation, effective immediately. The board had voted while Cal was in surgery, chastened by the public's tidal wave of goodwill after Helix's live press feed announced the emergency delivery. The document felt weightless compared to the fingerprints Junie had left on his soul, but he accepted it with a nod. He spent the first night pacing between 3 isolates, whispering the same introduction, "Hi, I'm your dad, probability's most devoted disciple." Tiny fingers curled around the tip of his glove as if in silent rebuttal, "You're ours now, belief will do." Days blurred into a rhythm of NICU beeps and kangaroo care. Junie, pale but iron-willed, held each baby against her chest despite 4 lines and a healing incision. Cal read them papers, picture books on mitochondria, lullabies disguised as protein-folding stories, until nurses threatened to confiscate his whiteboard markers. Reinhardt declared the gene edits stable, no off-target activity, no immunogenic backlash. "Your reckless optimism has officially matured into precedent," she told Junie, who answered with exhausted laughter. When the babies approached their original due date, Helix's atrium transformed into a glass cathedral draped with strings of DNA-shaped fairy lights. Employees queued beside investors, lab techs beside reporters, all waiting to witness the homecoming. Celine wheeled Junie through the crowd while Cal followed, one infant in each arm, the third cradled in a sling across his chest. Cameras flashed. Someone started applause that crescendoed until the marble floor vibrated. Cal paused at the microphone only long enough to say, "They are the data, and the dream, made flesh. Let's keep enlarging both." Upstairs, the office he'd once designed as a war room was now a nursery suite, 3 bassinets arranged under a mobile of rotating helixes, walls painted a shade Junie called courage green. Late that night, after feeding rotations and diaper algorithms, the building hushed. Cal stood at the window, Denver's lights twinkling like scattered bass pairs. Junie joined him, robe brushing his ankle, stitches pulling but uncomplaining. "Remember the first essay?" she asked, resting her head on his shoulder. "I framed it," he confessed. "It hangs behind the stock ticker screen." She snorted softly. "Data above dividends." He turned, sliding an arm around her waist, careful of healing skin, reverent of everything that had broken and mended to bring them here. The babies slept, chest feathers rising, monitors silent except for an occasional sleepy chirp. Beyond the glass, early snow dusted the peaks, an impossible weather pattern for late summer but fitting. After all, they specialized in rewriting odds. Cal kissed Junie with the gentle certainty of a man no longer afraid of shifting variables. "Triplets," he murmured against her lips, tasting peppermint and wonder. "And every storm we survived to reach them." Outside, clouds parted to reveal a sky uncommonly bright, as if the universe itself had decided to illuminate their revision of the narrative. Once infertile CEO, defiant embryologist, and 3 tiny co-authors who would spend their lifetimes proving that sometimes the most rigorous equations must allow for miracles.